basically, on my last video, I asked you to pick your 3 favourites out of the 6 male betters, that you wanted to follow for your spawning. You have selected your 3, so we're going for obviously the 3 with the most votes. I have counted said votes, and you will be seeing those males at the end of this video, so you know what ones we're following. Now obviously I'm going to try and film a little bit of all 6, but those are the 3 that we're concentrating on, as long as those 3 actually breed for me, because like I said before, you never know what way they're going to go. They're either going to go absolutely smoothly, they could start and you could get a male that eats all the eggs. You might decide, the female might decide she's just not playing ball, she ain't ready for that kind of shizzle at the moment. The male might be overly aggressive, the male might not be as confident as he should be. There's lots of factors that can go into it. Also, one of the 6, I will tell you, one of the 3 that was picked was the alien. And I actually haven't bred alien bettas or betas as yet. So this will be my first time with them, and apparently they're meant to be quite difficult. So we're going to see how that one goes. So yeah, I could epically fail at this, but never mind, it's fine. We're just going to roll with it. It's not a problem. You can be along with me, and if I succeed, I succeed. If I fail, I fail. But you'll be seeing those at the end of the video. So what we're going to go over now, hopefully, I'm going to give you a fairly educational video. Bear in mind though, I've been at work all day, and it's been a very stressful day. So, I'm going to try my real hardest here to get this all out correctly. Right, just to start this off, this is how I do it. I have done it many times before, but this is how I do it. There is lots of different ways. There are people's preferences. They like to use possibly bigger containers than this, bigger tanks than this. They like to use a smaller water volume than this. Some people don't even use tanks, they'll use a bucket. I've seen them being done in like a rubber builder's bucket before. I've seen them being done in plastic shoe boxes, like plastic storage boxes. I've seen them being done in them before as well. You can use whatever you want, as long as it works for you. Do your research. Please don't use me as the only one you ever watch. Go out, go and do more research. There's lots of different things, from the tanks you use, to the setup you use, to the food that you feed the males and females on before, when you feed the males and females, whether or not you feed them in this tank or whether or not you fast them. Some people fast them while they are in these tanks. Some people don't. So, very briefly, while you're obviously getting your equipment together to spawn your betas or bettas, you need to be thinking about. So I'm looking over there because I'm looking at the males that I'm flaring at the moment. I'm flare training, so they are slightly distracting me, but it's also keeping me on track because that's what I'm talking about. So you need to make sure that they are conditioned. What they are doing right now over there is part of their conditioning. Okay, so I've taken away the dividers in between the tanks, or in between their pots, or whatever you want to call them, that they're living in. And the idea is that you are flare training them. It keeps them fit. It's a bit like going out and having a little bit of exercise once a day. I do mine daily for around 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll recard them. Okay, my females are in a sorority, so they don't need to be worried about too much. But also part of getting them ready to spawn, so the conditioning, is feeding them. Now, I like to think personally that mine are conditioned all the time. I keep the males fit. The females are fit by being kept in a sorority, and I feed my bait as well. So I feed them bloodworm, brine shrimp, mysis, krill. I have a high protein pellet that I feed them. So everything works together. I constantly feed them like that. I don't feed my betas flake food. So mine, I'd like to think that mine are fairly conditioned, or conditioned well all the time. I've yet to have a problem, but that's how I do it. Some people don't. Some people will actually condition their males and females for around a week before. Some people actually like to put their males and females on what they call a dating Sorry if you don't like that. But like a dating regime, which is basically where they will take the male and female in their separate tanks, they will house them next to each other, and then they will card and decard them every day. So it's almost like they're having a little bit of a look at each other, having a little bit of flirt, they're getting the whole, you know, hi, how to meet, how do you do, you know, what do you do for a living, that kind of shizzle out the way. I don't worry about that. I've never personally had a problem. Sometimes it means that the mating process, so once you put them in here, it goes on for a little bit longer. Where other people have turned around and said by doing that, they will spawn instantly. I don't personally have a problem with them being in here for a day or two together. Again, my personal preference, other people would disagree with that. So anyway, now we've got that nonsense out the way. You need to be thinking about obviously tank setup. Now, try and get your tank set up around a week before you want to spawn. It just gives everything inside the tank a little bit of time to settle, all the air bubbles to disappear, if you haven't pre-aged your water, everything to come up to temperature if you don't preheat your water first. It just helps, it helps the tank, it helps age the whole area, not just the water. So, I personally use these kind of size tanks, which are a 12 litre, I think this one might be a little bit more. I think this one might be a 13. Well, around a 12 litre tank for mine. So, first thing you need to be thinking about is heating your water. I use a 25 watt heater and I set mine for around 28 in temperature. Now, when I'm putting these in, I like to put these in as low to the base of the tank as possible, due to how much water we have in the tank, which we'll go over shortly. Let's just get that stuck. So we put that all the way down now. It is slightly at an angle. I can get my hand, we'll see, I can get my hand underneath this part and virtually all the way along. So it is sitting at a slight angle. And then obviously we have cable, which I'll remove that. So our heater is in. It is set for the temperature that we want it to be at, or roughly. Next thing I think about is filtration, whether or not I'm going to add air to the tank. Now, bettas don't necessarily need airflow to the tank because they can breathe from the surface. They have the capabilities of doing that. But still, I like to run air in all my tanks. Now, some people will add the sponge filter after they have spawned and you have free swimming fry. I don't. I like to add it on my setup. I don't want to be disturbing the tank any more than I really have to. So I like to use a sponge filter because it's a nice gentle flow. You've not got to worry about your babies being sucked about too much. You can alter the airflow up and down as you see fit. So we have said sponge filter. This is the normal size sponge filter you get. Normally they come this size as the smallest. But, as I just said, with a low water volume, which we will get to why it is here in a bit, but obviously we need this below our water volume. So here are 5 markers. Each marker is around 1 inch. I fill my water up to around 5 inches, so that's the top here. And obviously, as you can see, this sponge filter is right on that mark, so that is not going to do. That is too big. So, pop that off. We don't need that. It's rubbish. Now, this is, you can see that. I also like to use pre-cycled sponge filters as well. So you can pop, even if your tank doesn't need a sponge filter in, like another tank somewhere, you can add this, leave it in there for a couple of weeks, and then it's nice and cycled. Or if you don't have another tank, then find a friend that has one. Or maybe you could go and ask your local fish store if you buy a sponge filter, if they'd cycle it for you. Don't know. Anyway, so we need to make this smaller. How do we do this? We pop the top off. and then all this comes apart. I'm sure really you guys know how to do this, but still, we're going to talk about it. Okay, so you take this apart. So what you need to do is then, if you pop that part off, and you have these, you don't need the top one. You pop sponge filter on, and then obviously as you squeeze through, you can feel the top of that one. What you need to do is get a pair of scissors and snip that off. And if by magic looks like Lupita, here's one I prepared earlier. Right, this is one that's been used before. So what you do then is, obviously, like I just said, you just cut the top off of your sponge, pop it back on, pop the top plate back on, and now you have an itty bitty little sponge filter. Good luck. Perfect. Okay, so obviously with that, you attach airline. This is black airline. And obviously you need an air pump. I don't have one of those to show you. I'm sure you all know what an air pump looks like. It's the box thing, vibrates, shoots air out when you plug it in. Simple. I have an over top air system loop. So mine is right up there. It's a big pond one. Shoots air all the way around PVC, and I just drop air lines out. So, but what is important, other than obviously this, is an air tap. You need a tap, because if you was just to plug this straight into your air filter and pop it onto that, that is going to be way too fierce for your adult bases, not alone the bubble nest itself and the babies. So you want to close this off as much as you physically can. Obviously attach airline, attach tap outside the tank, preferably, that way then you can get to it. And then turn it all on, and you want to literally turn this so you have a bubble coming out, a single bubble every so often. You want the water surface to be as still as possible, because obviously your mal is a bubble nest maker, or these particular types of bettas are a bubble nest builder. So they build their bubble nest on the surface of the water. So obviously you want your water to be as still as possible. So you don't want it bubbling away in the background like you're in a jacuzzi. You want it nice and still. So a little ripple every so often is absolutely perfect. Spongewood. So, next thing you want to think about is cover or line of sight blocks. Obviously you are putting 2 betta fish into this tank. Their other name is Siamese fighting fish. They will fight. They will fight, and they will kill each other if they decide they don't like each other. So, what you're putting the line of sight blocks in for is actually your female. It will give your female somewhere to hide while she's not ready, or if she decides that she does not want to breed, or the breeding has finished. So I like to use fake plants, as I've gone over before. They're nice and easy to remove. You don't need to worry about it, because once your fry are free swimming, or I personally, when the fry are free swimming, I remove virtually everything from the tank other than the bare basics, which is heater and the sponge filter. I will remove everything because I want to be able to get round and clear up properly. So it stops debris from hiding behind these and making you water banking. So you can use fake plants, we can pop that in there, maybe a rock, I don't know, whatever you want. I've used terracotta plant pots before. They work well if you turn them on their side. If you find they roll around your tank, if you get a piece of sandpaper and just rub your plant pot on one side on the sandpaper, it flattens a little bit on the edge, and then it will sit nice and still. Or you can put 2 rocks either side it if you want to keep it still. It's up to you. You could use this, which is half coconut shell that I've just pulled out of another tank, as a hiding spot. They work well. So, okay, so we've got line of sight blocks and somewhere for the female to hide, because obviously once your breeding is done, your female will immediately retreat and go and hide somewhere. So you need to be aware that when you're starting your breeding, you need to be present for it, at least to be able to come back and check on them on a regular basis. I generally set mine up for when I know I'm off work, so I'll set up a day or two before. Add the male in, because obviously he doesn't need watching while he's on his own. You can then add your female in, and just keep an eye on them. But we'll go over that bit when we get there. Okay, right, the next bit, I also had notes because I know what my brain's like. Right, the other thing you're going to need to be thinking about is how and what you're going, where you want your male and how you're going to help your male build a bubble nest. So, Indian almond leaves, wonderful things for bettas or bettas. So, I use a few of these. Now, there is a trick to these. I like to, I mean, obviously these are all new ones, so they're all dry. But I like to pre-soak a few of these before I want to use them. That way then, you can rip, so like this one, I'm just going to do it. You can rip these up into pieces, and then you can just pop them into your tank, wherever. And that will help soften your water and also give your water some tannins, which helps not only the adult fish themselves, but it also helps with the fungal that you might get on the eggs. It softens the water ready for the fry. So there's lots and lots of benefits to these with bettas, so I always add them to my tank. But you also want a dry one. You want a dry one. And the reason is, and there is something else I have now. Where did I put that? Ah, I found it. Okay. I like to help them out a little bit, because obviously if this is sitting on the surface of the water, like setting, after a while, this obviously takes on water and it starts to sink. Now your male is going to place and build his bubble nest underneath this leaf. So he's going to attach the bubbles to here in order to keep them up. So really you don't want this drooping or falling. It's not going to help the situation. So I like to use these tools, which is a square piece or a piece of bubble wrap that I've cut a square out of. A sucky thing, actually came off of a heater, and cable tie. I nearly forgot then what that was. Right, and a cable tie. Easy peasy. What we do is we take said cable tie and we stick it through said bubble wrap. You like that. And then we take that, we wrap that round there, and then you do it up. This then keeps the bubble wrap in place so it doesn't go floating across the tank, because I like to be able to keep an eye on my male's breeding, and obviously I don't want this floating off towards your sponge filter and wrecking the bubble nest. So I like to keep it under here. So then what you do, obviously this is easier when it's got water in it, but I'm not going to do this because obviously this is not where I'm going to store my bettas. It's on the rack. This is a spare tank. Okay, so obviously you stick this, yeah, you know what it's going to do. You stick that on your glass. Ugh. Not plain bowl. Right, so you stick this on the glass, which would be just above your water level, because you want this just floating on the surface. Obviously, preferably, again, it's easier to do when it's got water in, but preferably bubbles down. Okay, and then what I do is then I place the the Indian almond leaf, because it gives it that dark spot, so he thinks it's under a leaf, and then you literally just place that under there, and then those two will float just like that, and then your male will make his bubble nest under here. I don't even know if you can see me. Yeah, you can. So he'll build his bubble nest under here. If you give them a spot to build it in, they will normally build them in that spot. If you don't give them a spot to build it in, so you don't have anything floating on the surface at all, no Indian almond leaf, no bubble wrap, no nothing, they'll just find a corner and they will stick it to the surface of the water. They are capable of doing that, but they will prefer to stick it underneath something, and I prefer to give them the bubble wrap to stop this from sinking. So And that, I believe, is basically all you need. Have I gone through it all? Yes, I have. Yes. Okay, right, so we're going to talk about, you will need one other thing. You will need one other thing, and you need to start thinking about something else as well. You need a pot. So this is an old fish food pot that's extremely grubby. But obviously this would be clean. You can use a glass tumbler. You can use a glass jar if you want to, but basically so start prepping for something to put your female in. Because obviously your male will just go straight into the tank. No problem. 24 hours or so after, you need to introduce the female. Now, for her own safety, I introduce them into a container. So you could use this. These are handy because it's got the lip on it. Underneath they float. So that tends to float on its own without a problem. You can use a glass jar, which obviously would just sit on the base. But make sure that obviously your container is higher than your water level. Because obviously you don't really want female or male really jumping into either one until you know that everything is secure. The male is not going to attack the female. You want to make sure that they're nice and active. You want to make sure that she is showing signs of being interested. You also want to make sure that he is showing signs of being interested and not just aggression, like he wants to kill her the second you release her. Not good. Okay, right, let's talk about water level. So the reason why I only have mine at around 5 inches is so, obviously they build their nest at the surface. Now when they start to spawn, the male will wrap the female. So he will cover, so you've got said female, and the male will come over and wrap her in order to basically push and fertilise the eggs. So he will push the eggs out of her by squeezing her and then fertilise. So, and what happens to the eggs is then obviously the eggs are released. The eggs go down and fall to the bottom of the tank, and the male will go to the bottom of the tank, collect said eggs and place them in his bubble nest. He covers the egg with saliva, places them within the bubble, and the eggs stay up there to a degree. He needs to maintain his bubble nest, but they stay up there. Sometimes the female will help him collect the eggs, but this is the moment when you need to watch them carefully and make sure that either one isn't eating the eggs, because that happens. Okay, do not panic. I will go over this when we start to spawn them. You will see it, but do not panic. Your female is going to look like she has just died. Okay, she goes into what they call I've got to try and say it, catatonic state, whatever. Basically she goes sort of all limp and funny for a little bit. Okay, don't worry, she will come back. You might find she floats at the surface while this is happening. You might find she starts to sink. Don't panic, she will come round, not a problem. Okay, she will just suddenly, all of a sudden, rewrite herself, go up to the surface. Normally they grab a mouthful of air, and then if the female's going to help collect the eggs, she will. If not, she'll stay about ready and waiting for the next wrap. So don't panic, it's okay. Obviously if she stays like that for a while, then maybe you need to be checking on her. But I've never had one to it. I've never ever had a female pass away whilst wrapping. But it will look like she's just died. You know, hard work. Right, so this is why we only have it 5 inches, because we want the male to be able to maintain what he needs to do at the top to go down and collect the eggs and then lift the eggs back up to the surface. Now, obviously, once the spawning's done and you have removed your female away, I still leave the line of sight blocks in there for that moment in time, because you don't want to be disturbing the water surface at all, really, because obviously everything's floating underneath here and it's all very delicate. He will have to maintain that nest, and you may find that there is eggs falling from the bubble nest and dropping back down. It is his job to go down, retrieve those eggs, place them back up. He's maintaining that nest, he's maintaining the eggs within them. It is completely normal. I have had a male twice, sorry. 2 separate males that really struggled to keep his eggs within the bubble nest. He wasn't the best of bubble nest builders. Both of them were first time spawners. They couldn't maintain as well as they should have been. So what I did was I gave them a little bit of a helping hand, and I lowered the water level down. So then basically he had less area to cover between surface, so between the water surface and the bubble nest to the base. The next day when I got up, the majority of the eggs were back in the nest. So do keep an eye on that, but I like to try and keep it around 5 inches if possible. Okay, right, the other thing you are going to need to be thinking about is you're going to need to think of how you're going to take water out of this tank. Now, obviously, while they are spawning, and it only runs over 48 hours normally, that the male and female are both in here together, so it's not a problem. You don't need to take water out, because if you've got a pre-cycled sponge filter, you'll be fine. Honestly, you will be fine, as long as it is cycled. Obviously, do keep an eye on your water checks and your parameters and everything else, but I've never had a problem. Okay, the other thing you need to be thinking about is obviously when it comes to taking water out, you need to be thinking about how you're going to do that. Really simple. I think it's very simple anyway. I have an airline jib here, and I've got an air stone attached to the end of it. When it comes to the spawning and you've got little free swimming fry, only when they are free swimming, do not do it beforehand, but only when they are free swimming. I will go over this again, but obviously this is equipment that you're going to need to be thinking about, so you want a lymph airline, tubing and an air stone. Okay, but you can pop said air stone into the water, siphon water out, nothing gets sucked up through that. Nothing's coming through that other than water. It's not probably, and it is a very, very slow process to do, and I only do an inch at a time. But we will go over that. I'll have a whole little written schedule of what I do. It's over there. But we'll go over that when we need to. But this is equipment that you're going to need to be thinking about. The other thing you're going to need to be thinking about is obviously with, you know, you've got food for your adults. You're going to need to start thinking at this point, at your process of setting up, you're going to need to start thinking about how are you going to feed those tiny, weeny little eyelash baby fry. Because they're tiny, you need to start thinking about it. So I like to feed mine vinegar eels, which I've just realised I didn't get down. They're all the way up there. I'll show you a picture of what vinegar eels are, but they're a tiny little nematode, wormy thing, that are just the right size for tiny wee little baby bettas. I like to use them first for the first few days, and then I go over to BBS, so baby brine shrimp. So obviously, if you're going to be using vinegar eels, you need to be getting hold of a culture before this process. You need to be making sure that that culture is taken off before this process. And if you're going to be, some people do just go straight to baby brine. I don't. I like to start with something a little bit smaller. So again, you're going to need to think, if you're going baby brine shrimp, you're going to need to be thinking about how you're going to hatch it, because, right, my personal thing is I've tried the egg yolk with bettas or bettas. It didn't work. I had losses more than I would with normal live food. I think that the live food that's wiggling around the tank actually activates them to snap at it. And obviously, because then they've snapped at it, it's like, oh, that's food, and they just keep snapping. In the end, they turn into ferocious little swimming heads, and they're just like Pac-Man everything. So I like live food. So I personally start with vinegar eels for the first 3-4 days, and then I swap over to baby brine shrimp. So you're going to need to think at this process or before this process what you are going to feed your babies on, because you know they need to eat, otherwise not going to get very fat. Okay, so I believe that's it. Is that it? Yes, that's it. That's it. If I've forgotten anything, I will let you know. Oh, I did. Lid. Obviously, I'm doing this. Needs a lid. There is a reason why it needs a lid. Because you've got, obviously, the temperature of said water. It actually helps the nest, the bubble nest itself, if there is humidity on the top surface. You don't really want this surface being cold with no lid on. Obviously it also helps with evaporation and things like that, but the fact that this is here, and when they first start, when the babies first take their first gulp of proper air from the water surface, it can actually damage the organs inside them if they're breathing in cold air. So you want this to be fairly humid and fairly warm, the air space between the water surface and obviously the outside of your tank. And it keeps the little buggers in as well when you start to fill. Now obviously this is, like I said, this is a spare tank. I haven't actually used this one for Bettas or on the racks, so normally my lids are polycarbonate, plasticky clear stuff, so then the light shines through. Again, I'm also showing you this way round because on my rack I look at them that way, so they're lengthways, that way then I can get more on a shelf. On this particular rack here I have 6 up here and another 3 along that one sitting next to another bigger tank. So mine are set that way, but obviously to help you lot see, that's why I had it like that. So I'm going to stop waffling because I'm pretty sure that's all I could actually tell you at the moment. The next video is going to be actually me, the tanks will be set up and I will be putting the males in and then putting the females in. We're going to see this, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to start seeing some bubble nest building. Hopefully I can get that on camera. Hopefully everyone performs correctly, because you know what it's like when you're under pressure. Sometimes it just all goes to pot and you just can't perform. Okay, so I'm going to love you and leave you and stop waffling on. Now, let's have a quick look at the 3 that had the most votes. And they are the 3 that we are going to be focusing on, hopefully. So fingers crossed for me, people. Let's do this.